It was a very interesting week number 6 because almost every single running back not named Derrick Henry who was popular failed to hit. And at running back, that's not necessarily what you expect. Like a wide receiver, if you swallow the chalk, you kind of get what you're asking for. At running back, that's usually not going to be the case. So we're going to dive in, break down what we saw in week number 6, and see how we should handle these backs and others going forward. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, week 6 kind of sucked. How you doing?
Yeah, not great. Not a great week to fade Derrick Henry. But I don't know. I mean, sitting through 3 quarters, I was like, I'm glad I faded Derrick Henry. This is exactly what I wanted. He was at like 108 yards, no receiving really. And then, of course, the 94-yard touchdown run goes into overtime because A.J. Brown's awesome. Of course, the 40-yard catch, and then he just walks into the end zone. So Derrick Henry, look, I'm probably going to spend like 60% of this podcast tilted, which is actually the same as Derrick Henry's snap rate. So,
see, I was underweight, but I still had enough. I had enough where I should have been okay. However, every other running back I used kind of canceled out what happened from Derrick Henry. Yeah. I didn't have Deandre Swift, obviously. I had some Joe Mixon who was fine. Like Mike Davis eventually got to double digits. That's great. Alexander Madison. Who? So even though I had Henry, I didn't have enough elsewhere. The good thing is that I had Henry in like game stacks with Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller. So like there were some lines that are fine, but it was still my worst week of the year by a pretty significant margin. So honestly, like it's not going to change my process because I had a very tight core at running back. And when I have a very tight core at running back, I know that weeks like this are possible if said core falls flat on its face across the board, which is exactly what happened. That's kind of an assumed risk, but I'm actually okay with that risk because I think I'm a pretty smart bankroll player where I'm not overextending myself. I'm not putting more out there than I can afford. And so like I can have weeks like this and still be fine. You know, it's going to be okay. So I think to me, it's not going to lead to an alteration in my process. What about for you? Any reinvestigations for you based on the way things went down in week number 6 outside of the Derrick Henry thing?
No, I mean, look, if you told me Derrick Henry,
I said outside of the Derrick Henry thing.
Well, okay. All right.
We're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, it's tough to move past. But no, I think I think I did what I typically do. It's been long-term successful for me. I'm usually, I think, between the two of us, much more aggressively willing to avoid the chalk. Not that you're just a chalky player, but right. You figure out ways to get access. I'm much more willing just to kind of go with an outright fade. I almost faded Julio outright just because I didn't know what his health would be.
It wasn't that popular anyway, I don't think.
Right. But I, thankfully got back in on Julio because the reason to avoid players is just popularity because, if Alexander Madison, who's on 35-40% of lineups, tanks and you don't play him, you have a huge leg up. And that's the whole point. It's hard enough to post a great lineup. Right. But if you can kind of take out a third of the field whenever someone just bombs, it's really...
But your process is different at running back than wide receiver.
It is.
Right.
Wait, did you say it is?
Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure because I think that's a key difference to make because when you look at hit rates of different positions, running back is always going to be the highest hit rates. I've done studies on that like the past 3 or 4 years. When you look at roster rates of players in perfect lineups, running back is always hyperinflated. So that's why I'm saying I'm not going to change my process is because I know over the long run, it's okay to go chalk at running back. Okay. At wide receiver, it's a different discussion. I'm just saying that I'm not going to fade the chalk at running back going forward just because the chalk was bad this week.
I thought you meant like an overall process. I didn't know you were specifically asking about.
The other thing, too, is I'm okay. like just kind of playing my favorite plays at running back, because sometimes my favorite plays are different than the field's. Like I've been overweight on Mike Davis every week, I think. And then like last year I was overweight on Wayne Gallman. This week I was overweight on like Kareem Hunt, which did not work obviously. But if I'm just like different from the field because I prioritize things differently as opposed to like game theorying it, that's okay. So it was a rough week for me for sure, but it's not going to lead to an alteration in my process. With that said, let's dive into the games here, starting off with that, your favorite, Brandon. The Texans at the Titans went to overtime. More time for Derrick Henry to rack up points. Do you want me to take this one, or are you okay?
No, I'm good. I mean, look, I'm fully willing. It's not like I can hide it, but Derrick Henry owned me this week. Like, that's what happened. The Titans, though, may have lost left tackle Taylor Lewan to an ACL, which would be a huge loss there. But specifically with Henry, he had 22 carries for 212 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He did get 5 targets, which is a season high for him. He had 52 receiving yards, the majority of which came on pretty much like a busted coverage in overtime. But that's the first time he's gone over 15 yards as a receiver this season. I mean, that's the risk of being low on Henry. He has multiple touchdowns in 3 straight games. But again, through 3 quarters, he had 18 carries, 108 yards, just 1 catch on 4 targets, which is solid, but -1 yards. We know Henry generally doesn't do much with his targets, even if he gets them. No touchdowns either. And, that's kind of what you're banking on for Derrick Henry to fall short, because he can't rack up. And I know he got 52 yards receiving this week. He doesn't get 60, 70 receiving yards with, 8, 9 targets. It's not really what he does. So he has to score. He has to break a long run, and that's exactly what he did. Now, in fairness, his target share is up to 8.7% on the season. That's 3 targets per game. But to me, he's still a one-dimensional back. In this game where he blew up, he played 60% of the snaps. That's not really what I want to, get for a back who's 9,000 on FanDuel. So I'm going to ask you about him after I recap the rest of this game. But Ryan Tannehill was really good. He can throw for a lot of touchdowns too, which is another reason just to be a little bit okay to be lower on Henry, at least in my opinion. He was 3 times the NFL average in this game in terms of passing net expected points per drop back, which is a numberFire metric. His average target depth ticked up past the NFL average in this game. He was kind of keeping it close to the vest throughout the first few games for the Titans. Tight end Jonnu Smith left early with an ankle injury. That led to Anthony Firkser leading the team with 9 targets. A.J. Brown had 7 targets. Adam Humphries had 6. Brown got up to 84% of the snaps. Then it was Humphries and Firkser at 55%. So it's kind of been Brown or nothing in games where he's been healthy. He has a 21% target share in the games that he's played. Humphries in 2 games in that sample is at 16%. Firkser and Jonnu Smith are at 14%. So as far as the pass catchers go, it's really only A.J. Brown on a full slate that I would like to look to. He's averaged 8 targets in his games, 2 red zone targets. Not a whole lot of downfield work, but did have a better ADOT this week than before. They host the Steelers in Week 7, which is definitely a tough rushing matchup. The total, though, is 52.5 on FanDuel Sportsbook. It's a tight spread, so I think that game is going to require a lot of my attention by Thursday whenever we look at the Week 7 slate. For the Texans, Deshaun Watson was great statistically. 0.66 passing net expected points per drop back. League average 0.15 right now for all quarterbacks. Outside of his first 3 games when he had really tough matchups, he's been really good. 0.47 passing net expected points per drop back. 331 passing yards per game. And, he's thrown to Will Fuller a lot. Fuller had 11 targets for 123 yards and a touchdown. This week, Brandon Cooks had 9. Darren Fells had 7. Their most relevant sample is a little hard to pin down because Cooks was limited in Week 1. Fuller got blanked in Week 2. They've had Duke Johnson back for 3 straight games with effectively no Jordan Akins. So I'm going to look there. But Will Fuller is at 25% of the targets in that sample. Cooks is at 23%, and nobody else is above 14.2%. Fuller's getting downfield work as usual, 3 downfield targets per game. Cooks is at 1.3 there. Fuller has a really, really good role right now. 13 plus FanDuel points in every game aside from Week 2. And then, for David Johnson, his snap rate's been back down to about 70%, which is what we saw in week 6 with Duke Johnson healthy. He's at 22.3 adjusted opportunities, which is carries plus 2x targets. It's not terrible, but it's not enough to make me want to play David Johnson. They host the Packers next week, so there could be a lot of elevated pass volume. The total is 56 points there. So spoiler alert, next week has a lot of good games.
Yeah, it does. And like a lot of really good games. Like it's not like, oh, okay, I can talk myself into that one, but there are a lot of fun ones. I think with Derrick Henry, the way that I play things in general with him is I ask myself, what are the odds he can make me regret not playing him at this salary? And then I adjust my exposure based on that. I had it at around 20% odds, given that he was $9,000. I think I should have had that number a bit higher because not because of him specifically, but because of the other running backs in the slate. Like we talked about this on Thursday. There were the running backs in dream matchups, but then there were the guys with better workloads and tough matchups. There weren't any like no-brainer plays outside of I still think Alexander Mattison and Mike Davis were. But like the pool of running backs who were like no-brainer type guys was pretty small. So I think that should have increased my willingness to use Derrick Henry. So if I were to reinvestigate it, I think I should have viewed Henry more in the context of the specific slate and said, okay, it's normally around 20% if I have great running back options elsewhere. On this specific slate, maybe it's closer to 30%. So I think that might be the way that I change things going forward. Any final thoughts for you on that one?
No, I think that's the key. I do run simulations and kind of figure out, the probability if someone leads a position or is top 5 in a position at FanDuel points. Henry really stood out there last week, but I just saw too many paths to 15 FanDuel points, which, if you get 15 FanDuel points at 9,000 from a running back, that's attainable from a lot of other backs. You really have to hit on lower salaried plays elsewhere. So I was playing that angle that he didn't really score. It didn't pan out, but I think it was justifiable. I really should have had, some exposure though. So I think it was justifiable to be low on him, but not really justifiable to fade him.
And with that, we will leave Derrick Henry for next week. 3 days from now, what could go wrong? We had ourselves a repeat winner in the FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League this week. Russ EJL0 took it down with a score of 217.72, which is just a massive number. It was his second time winning it in 5 weeks. He actually tweeted at me both times to let me know because the first time he did not enter that lineup in any other contests. This time he did. He finished 4th in the Pooch Punt and 10th in the Sunday Million. So I'm pretty sure he will be more happy with those winnings than the FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League winnings. But hey,
he listens to us?
I mean, yeah, he tweets at me. I assume that he listens to us. I know he listens to us and somehow won money. He used Derrick Henry. He had Julio. He had Justin Jefferson. Like that's a smart play. Can we take credit for the lineup? No. Am I going to pretend that I do? Yes, very much so. He did it despite listening to us. I think is the right way to listen to this. The Week 7 Listener League should be up sometime late Monday or Tuesday. To enter, go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. That's FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. It is a $5 entry with 3 entries max and no rake. Once again, congratulations to Russ EJL0 for that win and the other cash elsewhere. Spend it wisely in the Week 7 Listener League. Let's move now to Denver at New England, where Drew Lock returned, and he threw 2 really, really bad picks late in the game, and his overall numbers were bad. But it's important to remember the context here. He was playing on the road against the Patriots defense with no Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, and KJ Hamler. Fant and Hamler should be back soon, so Locke will have easier matchups too. So I think Locke is going to play well enough to make guys like Jerry Jeudy, Fant, Tim Patrick all DFS relevant, which is key because next week they play the Royals, not the Royals, the Chiefs. Wow, they play the Chiefs, just the defending Super Bowl champs. That's hideous. Anyway, they play the Chiefs next week. We need the Broncos to score points to keep pace. I think based on what I saw in week number 6, I think they can potentially do that. Philip Lindsay made his return, and with Melvin Gordon out, Lindsay was a pretty high usage guy. He had 23 carries but no targets. Royce Freeman played over Lindsay on a lot of third downs. This could be because Lindsay was still working his way back, but seeing him not get passing game work, even with Melvin Gordon out, means he's never going to grade out as a priority, and Melvin should be back next week. So I wouldn't view that as being a big positive for Philip Lindsay. Tim Patrick, though, does continue to impress. He went over 100 yards for the second straight game. He led the team with 8 targets. Jerry Jeudy had 5 while dealing with Stephon Gilmore. Patrick is actually averaging 3.5 deep targets per game the past 2 games. He is at 31% of the deep targets this year. Jeudy is at 19%. I'm not saying we should rank Patrick ahead of Jeudy, but it's possible that Jeudy won't be some big target monster once Fant and Hamler are back. And if you're ever inclined to game stack a Broncos game, for right now, I think I would include Patrick in that mix. I wasn't expecting this, but Tim Patrick, he's kind of making us do so. I'd also mention Albert Okwuegbunam had 6 total targets. 4 of those were end zone targets. One of them went right through his hands. Another one he dropped. Noah Fant will be back. I'd expect Okwuegbunam to still play snaps, but I'm not expecting a big role once Fant is there. But it was nice to see Drew Lock throwing passes to Albert Okwuegbunam once again. Cam Newton had a really, really bad day on Sunday. He lost 16.96 passing net expected points on 29 dropbacks. That's like half a point per dropback. It's actually more than that. That ain't great. Their offensive line was a mess. So this wasn't all on Cam. They were on their third string center. Their left tackle was playing left guard at the start. Their right tackle got hurt pretty early on. So this just doesn't seem like a good offense right now. And that's hurting Cam. So the rushing is great. Another short touchdown on Sunday, but it does cap his ceiling if the offense is going to suck. It also makes it almost impossible for anybody else in his team to have fantasy relevancy. None of Cam's 25 passes were deep. He's been inefficient on the full season, so we can maybe get back here when their line is healthier. I think that David Andrews is eligible to come off IR, not this week, but the week after, I think. And their backup center, Ferentz, is on the COVID list. So it's a terrible offense for DFS right now, and I would be trying to avoid if possible. The backfield continued to be split with Damian Harris leading with 6 of 15 running back carries. He added 1 target. No thanks. James White had 9 targets, but 4 carries. White is ranked first here. But none of them are DFS viable. I don't think White has the easiest path to a ceiling, so I can't really use him either, despite a nice target share for sure. And the same is true for the receivers. N'Keal Harry and Julian Edelman combined to turn 8 targets into 8 yards. This team is bad, and we don't have any incentive to buy low on them. So I'm okay missing out if the Patriots burn me. But Brandon, I want to talk to you about the Broncos because, again, they got a big matchup with the Chiefs next week, and we need the Broncos to score points to keep pace. Are you comfortable making that assumption, assuming we get guys like Noah Fant back?
Keeping pace, not quite.
I guess maybe keeping pace isn't the right. Showing life enough where the Chiefs have to pretend to try in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are enough paths, enough players, and frankly, with the Broncos, I would imagine all the salaries will be low. They're going to have to be low. They are 9.5-point underdogs. We talked a few weeks ago on that slate where, there was like one game with a spread closer than 6.5. Usually teams that are underdogs just kind of don't live up to even their lowered projections and expectations. So I don't know if this is going to be a week where I chase game stacks because there are a lot of chase game stacks in games with big spreads, I should say, because there are going to be a lot of closer games. So I will have some exposure to the Broncos, but I really am not going to be enthused to go super hard at them. So depend on the salaries, but I would imagine they'd all be pretty low, and they'd have to be for me. Yeah,
Jeudy is 56. Patrick is 55, which is higher than I thought, but I think that's right. Fant is 66 or 6,000. Sorry, not 66. He's 6,000. Every time I write Fant, I either write Fanta or Fanty. I don't know why. It's like muscle memory of like
not
fantastic,
fantasy.
I think. Yeah, fantasy. Oh yeah, okay. Well, wow, that's smarter. It's like every time I try to type about Logan Thomas, I type out Logano Thomas because of NASCAR. So muscle memory is bad. Either way, the Broncos can help offset some of the salaries in the Chiefs, and I think I might go there. It depends on the way the rest of the slate breaks, but I think the Broncos can do enough to allow us to use the Chiefs. Let's move now to Cincinnati at Indianapolis. We liked this game a little bit on Thursday. It didn't necessarily work out the way I was hoping. T.Y. Hilton sucked, and it's my fault. Like, the Derrick Henry thing I can explain away. The T.Y. Hilton thing, was explicitly my fault. It was a very bad play. So you talk about the rest of this game and what you saw here.
So the Colts won 31-27. Phillip Rivers was, he had a bad pick, but he was good otherwise. 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0.42 passing net expected points per dropback. Despite this, and this is the problem with the Colts, big problem with the Colts, nobody had more than 8 targets. That was Marcus Johnson, which works out to 18.2% target share. I joked with you about T.Y. Hilton and kind of just this Colts team in general. I am never surprised if their lead target getter is at an 18% target share. And that's what we saw. And that's why teams like this don't have a lot of DFS relevance. Zach Pascal had 7 targets. Nyheim Hines had 6. Trey Burton and T.Y. Hilton each had 5. Hilton in particular is problematic. He had 11 of the 371 yards. Only one of his 5 targets was 16 yards downfield. He had 29 air yards. It's just not the same T.Y. Hilton that we've seen in years past. The market share is not really there.
Do you want T.Y. Hilton in our Dynasty League?
No, my team's not very good. So.
Okay. Carry on. I'll look for other suitors while you're talking.
I think the most relevant sample is this team with Trey Burton over the past 3 games. Hilton does lead with a 19% target share. Pascal's at 16%. Burton's at 15%. I mean, Hilton does have a 9.3 yard average target depth with 1 downfield and 1 red zone target per game. It's honestly not the worst, and I see what you saw in him. It just hasn't panned out. And I'm going to be very astonished if Hilton...
You don't need to say that you saw what I saw in him. It's okay. I'm not going to, you don't need to tie yourself to this. It's okay. I appreciate you, though.
Anytime I see a team and I'm not certain, like with some amount of confidence that their top receiver is going to get 25% of the targets, I usually just kind of avoid that in DFS whenever possible. That's just what we have here, I think, with the Colts. Zach Pascal has a lot of downfield work. Burton's involved in the red zone. I think Burton's a fine low-end tight end play. I don't want to chase him too much, but it's where I am with this pass game. And honestly, the backfield's somewhat similar. Jonathan Taylor played 59% of the snaps, had 12 of 13 running back carries, which is a great share, but it's not enough volume. He had 4 targets, which is viable. It's 9%. But, since week 2, so if you look outside of week 1 when Marlon Mack got hurt, he's at 20.4 adjusted opportunities, averaging 16 carries and 2.2 targets. It's just not really, it's not there. That's like Kenyon Drake level for the full season. We're not excited to play Kenyon Drake. I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor is the same talent as Kenyon Drake. He's way better. But I just don't see the reason to chase it. The Colts are on bye in week 7, so I don't have to go here for at least a week. I like the Bengals a lot. Joe Burrow's fun. 313 yards. The efficiency hasn't been great overall. This was not an easy matchup, but he's at 0.07 passing net expected points per dropback on the season, which is well off the league average. But he's throwing it to the same guys. AJ Green had 11 targets. Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins each had 8. Nobody else had even 4. Based on target shares, that I just talked about with the Colts, I should be a little bit lower, but the volume here is a lot better. And we have, to me, a lot more fun assets, specifically with T. Higgins. But, since week 2, when T. Higgins kind of changed his role and got more involved in week 2, Tyler Boyd leads the team with a 21% target share. That's 8.6 per game. Higgins is at 18%, which is 7.6 per game. AJ Green still in the mix at 17%, but the target share numbers aren't great, but the target numbers are a lot better because of the passing volume. Higgins is averaging 2.8 downfield targets in that sample. Green is still at 2.6. He's been very inefficient on them, but he's getting a lot of downfield work. Boyd is at 1.8. I think Higgins is the number 1 here for me from DFS standpoint because of the ability to catch those targets and get the downfield work. So I like that a lot. I did get talked into Joe Mixon a good bit. You made some good points with him by Sunday. He got some work stolen by Giovanni Bernard. The carry split was 18-8 in favor of Mixon. They each had 3 targets. Mixon, though, played just 53% of the snaps. It's a 4-game low for his snap rate. He has been averaging. Yeah, but how hurt is he? Is he good to go?
Well, I mean, he missed. He missed the end of the first half. It's not like he missed the entire game, but I think it's relevant because he was not in the field for a while.
Bernard scored early.
He scored before Mixon was hurt. Yes, that part is true, but I think the overall snap rate worth noting that
Okay.
he was hurt.
Let's look past the snap rate.
Okay.
And let's look at his adjusted opportunities per game. It's 28.5 per game. But he had 77 over 2 games. And in the others, he's been right at 23 or 24, which is like not that great. I don't know if you look like you're ready to talk, and I was about to ask you.
No, I was pulling up. He's the RB6 right now for the week. He was fine.
But do you think that, the 24 adjusted opportunities is enough to feel great with Mixon?
No, because that's not you're not telling me he's going to get 24. You're saying he could get 30. If you're tossing out 33% of the sample and saying, oh, that doesn't count, that doesn't work.
Okay.
Because Bernard was healthy for those games, so that counts the most relevant sample. I think this game counts the most relevant sample too, even though he missed some time. I think that if you look at 28.5, I think that is a better estimation of his actual workload than 23 or 24.
Okay.
Right?
I'm asking you what you think.
I'm telling you what I think.
I know that I'm saying
okay.
You're.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I think Joe Mixon's still a fine, but
yeah.
I had the arrow.
I'm just saying he's not David Johnson, where he can't exceed 23 or 24.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
But I had the arrow way up on Mixon.
Okay.
I don't know if it's coming back down a little bit.
Okay, sure. Name that salary for Joe Mixon in Week 7 against the Browns.
He was what, 68?
7. There are 69. Huh, nice.
I'd say 7.
Yeah, I think that's about right. He's 74. I think that's appropriate. It's not a situation where I need to target him at that number, but I can get there for sure. I think that makes sense, right? 74?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on that slate.
Yeah.
And how that shakes out.
That's also a repeat divisional matchup, and I would note that there tends to be a boogeyman type thing around those games. That is true mostly when the quarterbacks are dependent on efficiency. Joe Burrow is not dependent on efficiency, so I wouldn't let it scare you away from guys like T. Higgins. I agree with you. T. Higgins is a rock star. I love him. I think he's so fun. I love the downfield targets. I agree with you that I put him above Tyler Boyd. He is 57. I think that's great. I like that a lot. So I think that we can just kind of proceed with T. Higgins as being this really fun wide receiver. And if he keeps on getting volume, we keep getting him for a low salary. Sweet. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think Higgins is easily the number one as a pass catcher. I would probably just prefer him to Mixon. I think if I could only play one Bengal. Considering
the salary, I might agree with you there.
Yeah,
I think I think Higgins is a really fun option at 70 or at 57. I think that Tyler Boyd though is still if you're game stacking that one, which is very in play, absolutely. Yeah. I would have Tyler Boyd in there for sure. AJ Green probably not, but I know he was better on Sunday. But
yeah, I'm not writing off Tyler Boyd, but I would prefer T. Higgins and AJ Green. I mean, he's still involved.
For better or for worse, baby. The Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills are set to face off tonight, and FanDuel Sportsbook is giving you enhanced odds on the game. New users can place up to a $5 bet and grab the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs at plus 2,500 odds to take down the Buffalo Bills. That is right. A $5 bet can earn you $125. One less Josh Allen has something to say about that. What are you waiting for? Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app and make sure you're first to deposit to see the enhanced odds. Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, West Virginia, or Indiana. New users only. Must wager on designated boost market. Deposit required. Max bonus $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Or in Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Let's move now to the thriller of the Week 6 main slate. Washington at the New York Giants. It was really bad. I am so upset that I live in Syracuse, New York, because it means I had to watch this game as one of my local games. Why? The Giants got to win here. It was not because of their offense. They had 240 total yards. Daniel Jones was 12 of 19 for 112 yards. He did run for 74 yards on a huge scramble because he's athletic. But he's bad, and it's hurting the offense, and I don't like them. The one guy you can use here is Darius Slayton, and I want to use Darius Slayton, but He's playing through a pretty big injury. He was questionable coming in with a foot injury. He played through it, but he was limping the entire game. I will go at him at times, but I need to start getting full practices before I go hard at him. Like, Slayton is the bring back option here, and he's a good bring back option. I would just prefer him to be healthy. The other note here is that Devonta Freeman claimed a bigger piece of the backfield. He had 18 carries and 2 targets. He played 73% of the snaps, up from a previous high of 54%. It's a hideous offense, so he might wind up being kind of like Le'Veon Bell was last year, which ain't great. So, it is what it is. On the Washington side, Kyle Allen was aggressively fine. He was at 0.04 passing net expected points per dropback. The problem is that came against a brutal defense, and he was still below average. If that's what you can do against a bad defense, it'll be hard to ever trust him in other spots. The exception, the Darius Slayton of Washington, is Terry McLaurin. He had 12 targets with 5 deep. That puts a season-long target shares at 27% overall with 46% deep. Logan Thomas has exactly 4 targets in 3 straight games. So even though he scored, I'm not going to chase it. It is McLaurin or bust here, and his upside takes a hit with the offense being really bad. In the backfield, Antonio Gibson did get 5 targets again, but it came with just 8 carries. J.D. McKissic got 8. Peyton Barber had 4. So this is still one we can safely avoid for now. Brandon, can we just skip this game? Like, do we need any discussion around this? Or can we go to Atlanta and Minnesota?
Let's just move past it.
Let's do it. Julio's back, baby. Tell me about it.
Yeah, he made a splash in this game. Had 10 targets to lead the Falcons. He had 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. Calvin Ridley had 7 targets. So they were the only 2 to get up past 5 for the Falcons. Ridley scored again, had 61 yards. Not the best game, but definitely not a terrible game from Calvin Ridley. In 3 games with Julio playing at least half the snaps, Matt Ryan's been really good. 0.46 passing net expected points per dropback. Again, league average 0.15. In 3 games without him, negative 0.02. So I'm going to change my tune with Matt Ryan whenever Julio plays. I was a little slow to react to that, but I think that's the right call. In those games, the target shares are hovering around 20% for Ridley, around 20% for their top 3 guys. Ridley's at 22%, Jones is at 20%, Gage is at 19%. Hayden Hurst is then down at 13%. So I think the volume here is what really sets them apart because, again, the target shares aren't amazing, but the volume is. Ridley has 9.7 targets per game with 2.3 downfield per game, 2 red zone targets per game. Julio's at 8.7 targets, 3 downfield, 1.7 red zone. Even Gage is at 8.3 targets. He's getting some downfield work, some red zone work. It's a good offense when Julio plays, but I still think it's Ridley over Julio for me. It's a lot closer than it was entering the week. I have lots of injury concerns still with Julio. And the fact that he might not finish a game, that's probably really stupid. But I have no issues with Calvin Ridley, so I think by default I have to put him first. But again, that gap is a lot closer than it was entering the week. Todd Gurley had 20 of 32 running back carries, just 47 yards, 4 targets for 20 yards. He's been really irrelevant in terms of fantasy scoring when he hasn't scored a touchdown. He has no yardage ceiling, so that's kind of what you get with Todd Gurley. You need him to score, and even if he does, he's not really going to put up a huge game. The Falcons host the Lions next week. The total's 56.5, 3-point spread. Everyone's going to be all over that one, and I think it's justifiable. Creep me out, Jim.
I was looking at Todd Gurley's game logs, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'd be so tempted to use him this week. Like, he's going to be the guy where I'm like, I really want to fade him, and I should fade him from a process perspective.
I don't even know if he
can't burn me. That's the thing. It's like I talked about my discussion with Derek. He did have 23 points last week, so credit to him there. But like, can he get 30? No. Can he make me really hurt? Probably not.
No, and the salary will probably be up. I don't know what it is.
66. So, like, that's low. That's why it's a discussion. If he were 76, it wouldn't be a discussion. Like, I don't care. But he's 66. So
it's weird because he has a floor because he's always involved to a degree, but that doesn't make him a cash game play because he also can't. You need your guys not to just have a floor, but have a ceiling to make up for where you miss because you're not going to hit. And I think
I am, obviously, after this past week. Mike Davis can't fail. Kareem Hunt can't fail.
Yeah. You know who else can't fail?
Alexander Madison.
Oh, man. Dalvin Cook was out, so there was a huge opportunity for Madison, but he did not take advantage of it. He had 10 of 13 carries, but total 26 yards on them.
The one time the Vikings don't freaking run the ball.
And they said like they don't even change their offense when Madison's out there and Dalvin Cook's out. Like 2 targets for 4 yards for Madison. In terms of the snap rate, 48%. Not what we anticipated for Madison, and I don't know. I still think it was a good process play. It didn't pan out. That happens. But I would do it again. Cook has a bye week coming up to get right, so it's very likely Madison's window of relevance is already closed by week 8. And even if Cook were to miss again, it's kind of tough to get back in on Madison. But the arrow is way up on Justin Jefferson. He had 11 targets. He was the only Viking to get above 5. Adam Thielen, Irv Smith Jr., Chad Beebe all had 5. In fact, Jefferson had 5 downfield targets alone, which was tied for the week best so far with 2 games left to play on Monday. Thielen had multiple. He had 2 downfield looks, but Jefferson, he had 3 targets in each of his first 2 games before breaking out with 9 in week 3. He's at 100 yards in 3 of the 4 games since, at least 166 in 2 of them. Since that role shift, he has a 24% target share. Thielen's still above him at 27%, but they both have huge ADOTs, above 12.5. Both are above 100 air yards per game. Jefferson's averaging 3 downfield targets per game. In that sample, Thielen is at 2.5. Cousins, for whatever you want to say, throws downfield frequently in terms of his downfield attempt rate. He has a high ADOT. So, assuming the typical salary discrepancy, I'm going to lean Jefferson over Thielen. With the roles being similar, I would imagine that gap closes, but they are on bye, so we don't have salaries for next week.
I think I kind of prefer the one that's going to be less popular because Thielen was the obvious one on Sunday because he's coming off a bigger game. So I feel like whenever they're back next, just go to Thielen because like they both have such clear paths to big games and like they both have really good roles that either one could go off. So I'm just going to take the one that's less popular.
It's really
if they're even, I'll take the salary discount on Jefferson.
Yeah, it's really strange losing Stephon Diggs and looking at the Vikings offense and just being like, I kind of really like this passing attack for DFS.
I hate the offense. The offense has definitely gotten worse, but I don't know if that's that's not because they downgraded from Diggs to Jefferson. It's other things.
Yeah, but I mean,
no, you're right. I agree.
There's target shares here and high leverage looks.
And that's what we want. We want to know where the ball's going. Speaking of which, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers against the Chicago Bears. Wasn't a big game, obviously. The total here was low, and it actually hit the under, unfortunately, for me. So the pieces tied to this game wound up busting. Mike Davis finally had a bad game. He had 18 carries and 3 targets. That is 24 adjusted opportunities. His previous low was 28. So the revenge game did not pan out. I didn't view the Bears as being a tough matchup, but apparently they were. So we probably don't need to shift our views on Davis that much, but it's possible he's not quite as safe as I had made him out to be. My bad. Contributing to the Davis letdown was Teddy Bridgewater came back to earth. He had negative 9.42 passing NAP for the game. He's still at 0.20 for the full season per dropback, which is above average. But it's pretty clear Teddy is not matchup proof, and I think that's important to note. The good thing is that Teddy did still give the ball to just 2 guys. DJ Moore at 11 targets, Robbie Anderson at 5. For the full season, Anderson leads with 27% of the overall targets, and Moore is at 24%. Moore has 42% of the deep targets, while Anderson is at 33%. I'm going to keep Robbie a bit higher because of the floor. I think the floor for him is really good. Moore's upside is the same as Anderson's, but I just feel better about Anderson's odds of hitting a said ceiling. So I think I like both a lot, but I will put Robbie Anderson a tiny bit ahead between the two. David Montgomery didn't score, but he did keep his bell cow role. He had 19 carries and 5 targets. In 3 games without Tariq Cohen, Montgomery is averaging 26 adjusted opportunities per game. The problem is that even in a dream matchup, he didn't show a ceiling. I'm willing to use Montgomery in plus spots like this, but we need to keep in mind that the efficiency required for a ceiling probably isn't going to be there. He'll get the volume, but can he hit his ceiling? I think he can. But the odds of hitting that ceiling might not be that great. Allen Robinson, though, different discussion. he had a lack of efficiency on Sunday, but big volume again. He had 9 targets for 53 yards. Jimmy Graham had 8 targets for 34 yards. Graham is not someone I want to use because there's no yardage upside, but Robinson in the 3 full starts has 29% of the overall targets, 47% of the deep targets, and 27% of the red zone targets. Robinson is, I think, a higher quality version of Terry McLaurin. I think that's the way that I would view him. So I can use him when I don't hate the game, and I love him in those situations. That's just not always going to be the case. The Bears are facing the Rams on Monday Night Football, so they are not on the main slate, whereas the Panthers are facing the Saints. Brandon, let's assume Christian McCaffrey does not go, because I believe the Panthers have a bye in Week 8. So let's assume there's no McCaffrey again. Are you shifting the way you view Mike Davis going into that game?
Probably not. I don't think they have a bye in Week 8. I'm seeing a headline that McCaffrey's...
Oh, I think they play Thursday. I think it's a Thursday night game in Week 8, and then a bye.
No, I mean, it's more of a salary thing, I guess, at this point, because his salary jumped up from making him like a must play to, okay, he's, the price is where it should be. So it's going to depend on like where the salary goes. If it stays at 75, I'd be a little wary, but I think it'd jump down a little bit. I don't actually know yet, but name that salary then next week.
I would say 75 again, personally.
77.
Okay. It's similar to Mixon where it's like, it's not bad, but I can't view him as like a priority at that number, I guess, especially because like the Saints are another good team that are a good defense at times. So especially against
Alvin back.
Yeah. So I would say
Alvin.
Oh yeah. We get Kamara against the Panthers. Oh baby. That'll be fun. So let's just focus on that, not the trials and tribulations of Mike Davis. We're all good. Let's move now to Baltimore, Philadelphia, and I was hoping that the Eagles would keep this game close to make the Ravens keep their foot on the gas. They didn't. They finished close because they came back late, but it wasn't enough to force the Ravens to keep trying. Mark Ingram did get banged up, but the Ravens have a bye, so it probably won't matter. Honestly, I don't even know if taking one guy out of there would matter, but what'd you see in this one?
Well, if you take Mark Ingram out, I think he was at 12% of the snaps. What? That shouldn't have been funny.
Sorry.
No, I think I said something weird, but I mean...
No, you didn't. I was just... Sorry.
Okay. So he only played 12% of the snaps before he left. After that, it was Gus Edwards getting 44% of the snaps and J.K. Dobbins getting 41%. So you were correct where... Doesn't really matter. We're looking at, like a 50-50 split probably between Edwards and Dobbins. Edwards did have 14 carries for 26 yards. Dobbins had 9 for 28. Lamar ran 9 times for 108 yards and a touchdown because he's Lamar and he's getting healthier. So that's something that I really want to keep a closer eye on because I haven't really been feeling like I had to play Lamar a lot. But if he's healthy and he's going to run more, then that's going to change everything. So this backfield, even if Ingram's out, I think it's too much of a split to go to. I would probably prefer Dobbins because of the targets. He had 4. Edwards didn't have any. Dobbins is also, he can just bust open some big plays. So I would lean Dobbins, but I'm probably not going to play either of them, even if Ingram's out. There were just 27 pass attempts from Lamar. I always joke about, 24.5 is the over-under for him. Just kind of feels that way. And that's kind of what we got this week. It's not good for DFS. Marquis Brown had 6 targets. Mark Andrews and Dobbins had 4. Nobody had more than 57 yards. Marquis Brown, for anybody who's new to this podcast, I'm never super high on Marquis Brown, but he has had at least 6 targets in every game. He's averaging 2.7 downfield targets per game. It's a really amazing role within the offense, but it's not a particularly good role within the context of all receivers that we generally get on a DFS slate. So, I mean, this was, like you said, we wanted this game to be close, but this was pretty much the perfect Ravens game for what they want to do, and that's just run the ball and keep the passing attempts low. Mark Andrews also, I mean, he's had 4 fewer targets in 3 games. That's super tough. He's kind of like tight end Derrick Henry for me. He's one of the few guys at that position who can destroy you, but I don't ever think he's really worth the salary, and I haven't really changed anything. My views on the Ravens. They're on bye in week 7. Carson Wentz struggled against a great defense, 5.3 yards per attempt, 6 sacks, negative passing net expected points for him. Did have 381 air yards for whatever that's worth. The only relevant receiving workloads belong to Travis Fulgham and Zach Ertz, who each had 10 targets. Ertz had 33 yards before leaving early with an ankle injury. Fulgham had 75 and a touchdown. In Fulgham's 3 games, he has a 25% target share, which is 8.7 per game, 2.3 downfield, 1.2 red zone targets per game. Ertz is second at 20%, but has a 5.2 yard average depth of targets. Not even a lot of red zone work, just 3 total targets the past 3 games. So I think it's tough for Ertz. I do like Fulgham's role. I just am going to have a hard time trusting Carson Wentz. Miles Sanders left early with a knee injury. He's going to have an MRI. We don't know the extent of that injury yet. They play on Thursday, so probably going to see a lot of Boston Scott for week 7. But, I mean, Sanders was good.
Those dynasty shares, baby. Rest up, Miles. Rest up.
Yeah, Miles somehow
get that knee healthy, baby.
Was good. 9 carries, 2 targets, but broke a long run again for the second straight week, 118 yards. I mean, when Sanders is healthy, it's his backfield. If not, it's going to be Boston Scott. So they're Thursday. You're going to play Boston Scott on the single game slate. That's kind of where we are.
I was looking at that single game slate and I was like, I can't think of a single person I actively want to use in this game. So
Fulgham.
Sure. Yeah. Fulgham.
My boy. Old Dominion.
I just don't want to use it. I think you're right on Marquis Brown. Like the reason that I've been okay with him the past couple weeks is under the assumption / hope that teams kept it close. They haven't. So like it's never a cash game option, but like for tournaments, if we make the assumption that the team keeps it close, and I'm okay doing that, I'm okay playing the assumption game in tournaments, then he has bizarre upside. So, it's a risk for sure. There's never a good floor, but I don't care too much about floor. I just want a path to a ceiling, and his path is very obvious. His path involves the other team scoring points. And may not happen all that often against the Ravens, but it can.
It should be the Steelers in week 8 because that's the reshuffling week. So.
Oh, yeah. So that'll be fun. Coming off a bye? We'll see. Let's move now to, speaking of the Steelers facing Cleveland, and the Steelers offense continued to score points here. They just need the Browns to do something, literally anything to keep them pushing, but they couldn't do that. As a result, Ben Roethlisberger threw just 22 times for 162 yards. He didn't look good in the process. He was actually below average on a per-play basis, and it was an A-plus matchup. But again, it's a small sample, and for the full season, Ben is at 0.28 passing net expected points per dropback. I will trust that over some weird bad throws, especially with Deontay Johnson likely to be back next week. So I'm not going to overreact to Ben not looking great from a film perspective. Even with the cat volume, both Chase Claypool and James Washington were fine. Claypool had 4 targets, but he added another 2 rushes, including a short touchdown. He's a goal line back. Washington led the team with 7 targets. James Washington likely to be put back in the box when Deontay returns. But I feel great about Claypool, still given the high leverage touches. In 3 games with a high snap count, he has 21% of the overall targets, 44% of the deep targets, and 22% of the red zone targets. And that does not count his goal line carries. He will lose targets when Deontay Johnson is back, but I'm good here regardless. I think Claypool will kind of just confirm me that he'll get the kind of touches we like. James Conner is annoying from a role perspective. He had 20 carries, went over 100 yards again, but just 1 target. In the first 3 quarters, he had 18 of 20 running back carries, but both the carries he lost to Benny Snell came in the red zone, and Snell had a touchdown. So it's a mixed bag. I feel like his workload ceiling is capped. I don't view him as negatively as I do David Johnson or Todd Gurley, but to me, it's the same where I don't think they have the same range of outcomes as Joe Mixon, where I think they can get to 30 adjusted opportunities, whereas I think Mixon can. I'm not sure if those guys can. So he can't really get above 7,000 for me unless that stops happening. Defensively, the Steelers have likely lost Devin Bush for the season. He's a pretty big piece in their defense, so they may take a slight step back against backs and tight ends. And we'll have to keep an eye on that because it could impact the way we view Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, though, again, they did lose Taylor Lewan, which would at least partially offset the loss of Devin Bush. On the Brown side, Baker Mayfield got benched in the fourth quarter. Kevin Stefanski said it was because of the injury, and Baker didn't throw much during the week because of the injury. For the full season, Baker's at 0.11 passing net expected points per dropback, which is below average. But I think the good thing, if there is a good thing here, is that he's predictable when he'll be bad. He's done well in good matchups, and he struggled in the tough ones. And I think that the way that we do this is we just view the entire offense being matchup dependent as a result. They're facing the Bengals next week. Good matchup. We can use the Browns. Because it was over so soon, we want to be cautious with takeaways elsewhere. Kareem Hunt had 13 carries and 3 targets. Austin Hooper had a decent role again. So I'm going to keep status quo here from a team level perspective. The one alteration I'm making is I'm just going to be wary of this team against tough defenses, and hopefully they get Wyatt Teller back because he was playing really good football to open the year. Missed this game. They didn't play well. So I think the Browns are just matchup dependent, which is fine from a DFS perspective. Brandon, I can have blinders when it comes to Chase Claypool. So I'm going to let you talk to me about him first. 4 targets here, but good target shares over the past 3 games. What's your view of him now that we have a larger sample on him with an expanded role?
I mean, within the offense, he's like the number one clearly. That's really not a debate at this point. The issue is there's not a whole lot of issues, honestly. Like he can get carries for touchdowns. Like that's clearly something that they want to involve him in. That raises his floor, and he's getting downfield work. The ADOT's almost 13 yards over the past 3 games. I was a little more hesitant to buy in this week just because of touchdown regression and how it naturally works. But with this okay game, maybe people kind of take a step back for next week. And so I think Claypool is going to be a great play. The issue becomes it's a little hard to value him. I don't know where you're thinking. You're going to be higher on that.
I looked.
Okay.
And it made me nervous. Oh, he's $6,400, which is high enough where I need to take a step back, I think.
So this is one of those spots where when we play like Name That Salary, you say what you would kind of value him. Knowing what types of receivers are in that range, generally, I don't think it's unjustifiable, but like Robbie Anderson or DJ Chark versus Claypool, like, are we there yet?
I would say he's in a similar tier, but on the lower end of that tier. Is that appropriate?
I think.
Well, he's below Rob. I think he might be a tier below Robbie. I should say that, actually.
Yeah, Robbie's amazing.
So I would say.
But I guess right below them, I mean, it's Jamison Crowder, CeeDee Lamb, Manny Sanders. I
mean, I think Crowder's actually pretty good still.
Yeah.
But, like, I'd like him over Manny. I'd like him over whoever the other person, I don't remember the other name. But I think that Claypool his salary is high enough where he's no longer a priority, whereas he was a priority for me this week. And that's fine. Like, he's in play there, but he's not a priority. Is that appropriate?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move to Detroit at Jacksonville. It was gross. Deandre Swift did pop, got a lot of work, didn't play a lot of snaps, so he's going to be a really tough read. What'd you see here? Yeah,
I think it's easy to get ahead of ourselves sometimes with players as exciting as Deandre Swift. But he played 38% of the snaps, had 14 carries, 116 yards, but we know that if Adrian Peterson's healthy, he's going to get some touches. He had 15 carries, played 35% of the snaps. If you kind of take out, let's say even 10 carries per game, and carries aren't as valuable as targets, we know that, even on FanDuel, but if you tell me DeAndre Swift at best is going to like lose 10 carries and possibly goal line touches or some goal line touches to Adrian Peterson, that's going to be hard for me at any salary in DFS. That said, he had 4 targets. He's been trending up for a few weeks now. I'm just not there with DeAndre Swift to go too hard. Matthew Stafford threw for 223 yards on 31 attempts, so there wasn't a whole lot to go around. not as much as I had anticipated or hoped for. Kenny Gallarde did go over 100 yards on 6 targets because he's amazing. The matchup was really good. No other Lion, though, topped 31 yards. Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson did get 5 targets, but it was just Gallarde here. In 3 games with Gallarde back, he has a 23% target share, 35% of the air yards. TJ Hawkinson's at 17% of the targets. That's the only other mark above 11%. So it's pretty concentrated right now. Swift, again, trending up 13% of the targets over the past 2 games alone. But, I mean, it's Gallarde and it's Hawkinson right now. Gallarde's just amazing. 13.7 yard average target depth. I'm not quite to Swift just yet, but they're at the Falcons in that stellar spot. It'll be tempting to plug in Deandre Swift, but I don't think I can get there if he's not going to play half the snaps, and I don't know if he gets half the snaps next week all of a sudden. The Jaguars had DJ Chark in this game, and, I mean, Gardner Minshew is definitely aware because he's threw him 14 times, but he had 7 catches for 45 yards, which is not what you'd want on 14 targets. Minshew is above league average in games with DJ Chark playing based on passing and expected points per drop back. That does make me feel better about DJ Chark's market share. He had a 13% share leading into this, but 32% in this game, 46% of the air yards. And then Keelan Cole had 44% of the air yards and 9 targets as well. So there wasn't a whole lot else. Cole had 143 yards, 3 deep targets. Chark had these 2 other downfield looks. Cole has a 16% target share in 5 games with Chark. It's kind of a 2-man show at wide receiver for the Jaguars. Laviska Shenault did get 7 targets and a carry, but had 2 total air yards on his targets. He has 3 downfield attempts over 6 games, 3 red zone targets. I think targets for him are not the same as your usual wide receiver targets. They can be more creative, yes, but they're usually not downfield right now, and that's problematic. He is maxed out at 48 air yards. I know he's really good, but it feels like I'm still lower on Shenault than everybody else. James Robinson is not somebody I'm low on. He did handle all 12 running back carries, just 29 yards, but had 4 targets for 24 yards and a touchdown. That helps raise his floor. If you can catch passes, catch a touchdown, it's kind of very important for running backs in DFS. He's had at least 4 targets in every game since week 2. That's equivalent to about 8 carries in terms of expected FanDuel points. He's averaged 35 receiving yards per game. Wasn't great this week, but played 69% of the snaps. He's not getting scripted out, so I think James Robinson's a really good sort of low-end, mid-range DFS play.
Yeah. I agree with you on the Jags. Although I'm never going to use Keelan Cole, I think that was an aberration based on his previous usage. I refuse. But with DeAndre Swift, I think your analysis was pretty spot on. Like, it was really good, and he's super talented. The one reason why I'm like kind of teetering on like I think if he winds up being popular in week 7, he's the easiest fade of all time. But the reason that I'm willing to like be open to some things with him is because he is getting the kinds of touches that we like. He got goal line. I think he had like 3 goal line rushes in a row on Sunday. He also gets a lot of work in the passing game. So the comp that I've made previously, and it's not a player level comp, it's like a usage type comp, and it's also not an offensive comp, but like it's similar to Alvin Kamara as a rookie, where if you take little pieces out of the offense and free up more work for DeAndre Swift, he can have access to a ceiling in a hurry. But we haven't seen those pieces go away. Like Adrian Peterson's still there, Kerryon Johnson's still getting some. So I am open to the idea of DeAndre Swift eventually being a good DFS play. I just agree with you where like I need to see a little bit more before I feel great about it. Now, will I have maybe a couple of speculative shares next week under the assumption / hope that like, because we talked about Chase Claypool last week, production and Travis Fulgham. Production leads to additional opportunities in the future. I don't make that assumption with the Lions because I have a lot of samples saying, nope, like they don't care about talent or production. They care about veterans and stuff. So I think you can't do more than sprinkles yet. I'm okay with sprinkles because like I really like DeAndre Swift and I know that he's going to get the kind of touches that I like, but I can't do more than sprinkles right now based on the usage we saw in week 6.
I mean, he's the perfect, like, what salary are you thinking for DeAndre Swift?
Oh, well, that's the problem is if he got jacked up, then like,
but I'm saying,
I might not even do the sprinkles. Like his salary right now is that of like a $5,500 back, but he's not going to be there.
Right. He's 61.
Right. So like,
I don't think that makes him that doesn't make him unplayable, like untouchable in stacks, but he's not 55.
You have to make the assumption that his role changes.
Yes. And that's not usually, in my experience, that's kind of a losing proposition.
Exactly. So that's why it's a sprinkle type play. Only if you're like if you're doing a 3-max tournament, don't touch DeAndre Swift. Like there's no reason to. But like if you're doing if you're 150 maxing, sure, put some sprinkles in there and see what happens. Because if he gets additional work, his role will be really good because we know he'll get the kind of touches we like. But you're kind of going out on a limb, and with that team specifically, you should never assume talent will lead to touches.
James Robinson is 64.
For the Chargers, yeah, hard pass. I don't want that. Justin Jackson's better than James Robinson at that salary. What's Justin Jackson's salary?
61. I was going to mention him.
Yeah, Justin Jackson's a better. Do you want to bet Justin Jackson versus James Robinson next week?
I will never bet against the ball carrier.
I'm so proud of you. See, I've tried to get rid of you on this podcast so many times, but then you say things like that, and I'm happy you're here. Let's talk about Green Bay and Tampa Bay and erase all the happiness because I had a lot of Aaron Rodgers on Sunday. So when he threw a pick 6, I was like, yes, that's awesome. Like, I thought it would give the offense extra volume, extra incentive to throw. I was wrong. Shocker. Things are much better on the Tampa Bay side, especially for Ronald Jones. He had 23 carries for 113 yards, his third straight 100-yard game. He had 2 targets. Leonard Fournette was inactive, and he should be back next week, but Jones has performed well as a rusher. I've been slow to buy in, but I might need to start viewing it as being more legitimate. The pass-catching role, still a little shaky on, but like it's hard to take away carries when he's doing as well as he is. They're not on the main slate, thankfully. That's a good thing, but he's doing really well, and I need to give him credit for that. The other guy who showed up was actually Rob Gronkowski. He led with 8 targets and turned them into 78 yards, and what's interesting is that he was getting downfield looks. He had 2 deep targets and 2 in the red zone. He actually has multiple deep targets 3 of the past 4 games. Rob Gronkowski in the year 2020. I am as shocked as you are. So Gronk's actually in play. He has 50 or more yards in 2 straight. So I was wrong to write him off. I'll take the L there, and I'm okay with it. He's been good. So Gronk's in play. The problem is that Chris Godwin and Mike Evans didn't do much. In 6 games, Evans has 10 or fewer yards 3 times. That's fun. He has 100 yards in 2 of the other 3, but Chris Godwin was out in both those where he got 100 yards. I was not high on Evans this week because of Jair Alexander. So Evans will be more viable when he's facing lesser corners, but it's very clear there is no floor for Mike Evans right now. Chris Godwin has 7, 6, and 7 targets in 3 games with 3 total deep targets. I don't mind them, but it's been pretty gross so far. I prefer Godwin between the 2. I just don't know if either of them has a great floor right now. I think they both still have access to a good ceiling, but is it the ceiling we saw last year? Maybe not. On the Packers side, things got really bad here, and they took the first stringers out in the 4th quarter, so we can likely throw a lot of the game away. The good thing is that Devontae Adams had 10 targets and Aaron Jones had 5. Those guys will be fine. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had 5 total targets with 1 deep. So I'll put him next on the list ahead of Big Shot Bob Tonyan. And I'm going to keep things status quo here. And I'll be back in on this offense very soon. The problem is that David Bakhtiari got hurt and did not return. If he can't go, it does downgrade the offense quite a bit because he's among the best left tackles in football. We'd be able to use them in plus matchups, but in other spots, they would be pretty risky. That said, they're in a plus matchup next week against the Texans. So I would keep the status quo, except downgrade that if Bakhtiari has to miss time. Brandon, are we buying into Rob Gronkowski? Like, is this a thing now? Is that okay?
So I think there were basically 2 schools of thought with Gronk entering the year. One was he's Gronk, he's going to be awesome. And then there were people who said he was completely washed. I was somehow in the middle of that.
Yeah.
I thought like if if things went the right way, he could be like a low volume sort of efficient guy. If he can just get any downfield work, and then assuming he'd be involved near the end zone. And that's kind of what it's been. It started really slow, but it's a lot better to start slow and come on than, start strong and start to fade, which is kind of what we saw with him the last time that we saw him in the NFL was just a fade throughout the season. So he's never going to have significantly high volume, like week after week after week after week. But I think with the other options here, kind of taking attention away from him, and he has to do a little bit less. I think Gronk, especially with tight end being how it is, Gronk's certainly viable.
I also think it's important that his 2 50-yard games have both come with O.J. Howard out. So, that led to a role change where he was running more routes. And I think that's important. So, Gronk is in play. The Packers will be fine as long as Bakhtiari is okay. I don't know if he will be. So, keep an eye on that because it's a chest injury, apparently. And that's a little scary to hear for a left tackle. So, we'll see. Let's move to the Jets at the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa made his debut. And, Brandon, this is why we talk about tight spreads, because if it's an opposing team as bad as the Jets, they might get to pull starters in the fourth quarter and put out fun players like Tua. You need the other team to do something. Otherwise, a lot of guys can flop. And I think that's exactly what we saw here.
Yeah, the Jets did absolutely nothing. Nothing.
Literally nothing.
Nothing.
No. Sorry, we did get a little back and forth, little argument between Adam Gase and Greg Williams. That's always fun.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were being serious, and I was curious.
I am serious. It's really entertaining.
Well, from a fantasy standpoint.
Serious. What do you mean?
Well, I thought you meant somebody had some
fun here. I had too much Mike Gesicki for this game to be fun. Just get through it so we can get it over with.
Yeah, Devonta Parker left early with a groin injury. Not sure what is going to go on there, but Parker's usually almost always fun in that mid-range for wide receivers. But what I think is more important for the Dolphins right now is that we saw Myles Gaskin do work. He had 18 carries for 91 yards, 4 targets for 35 yards. That's not elite production without a touchdown, but with a touchdown that would have been over 20 FanDuel points. And I asked you entering the week if Gaskin had 20-point upside. I didn't think he'd get there. Obviously he didn't, but with a score he was there, and that's a really good role. It's even better for Gaskin than what I saw. I know it was against the Jets, but he played 70% of snaps. He's played 63% of snaps or more in every game entering this one. So I think Gaskin's in a really good spot for a running back right now. Losing Parker would definitely make this offense worse and harder to figure out a little bit because he had 8 targets and a 22% share. He has a 22% target share since week 2 when he's played his usual role, was not quite himself in week 1. But in that sample, Mike Gesicki, Myles Gaskin are each at 15% of the targets. Isaiah Ford's at 14%. Preston Williams is 11%. Williams does lead in average depth of target in that sample at 15.1 yards. Gesicki is almost at 12, which is elite for a tight end. So if Parker is good to go out of the bye, I'll go back to Parker and Gesicki. If not, it's probably Gesicki and Williams over Ford just from the hope of downfield work. But, Gesicki, look, he's got a great role for a tight end, but it just didn't work this week. 2 targets, played 66% of snaps, but that's what happens in blowouts. So, I'm not going to downgrade Mike Gesicki here. The Jets, there's not a whole lot to talk about. There just isn't. Jamison Crowder had 13 targets. Rashad Perriman had 8. Crowder, the most relevant sample here is probably weeks 1 and 6 with Perriman and Crowder healthy. Crowder has a 36% target share in those games, which is not quite sustainable. Perriman's at 18%, but it's those two. Perriman's getting downfield work with 13.2 yard ADOT for him. And then the backfields, LaMichael Pirine did play 58% of snaps. I don't want to dismiss that, but Frank Gore played 35%. It's a little bit similar to the Lions, where Frank Gore's still going to siphon away 10 carries, and it's
a much worse offense.
In a much worse offense, yes. So, I wouldn't really roster any Jets running back for a $0 salary.
We should try to get that going. Like, let's talk to someone here to see if we can get a Jets running back at $0. Because I agree, I would, but that would get people to use them, and we can score more points.
Yeah, the Jets traded Steve McClendon, their defensive tackle. The Jets had like a top 12 run defense entering the week. It was like the only thing that kind of made me hesitant at all about the Jets. But now if they can't stop the run or score, like the Jets might be.
Devin Singletary might score 12 FanDuel points next week.
Yeah, the Jets might be just a trap because the blowout is real. It's too real.
Yep. And that was my concern with the Dolphins going in, and it played out, and I should have allowed that concern to translate to Gesicki, but I did not. I agree with you. Gaskin's awesome. Like, he's playing well enough where even when Jordan Howard is active, it may not matter. So, and like, he's been healthy scratch 2 weeks in a row. We shouldn't expect him to be healthy next week, or active next week. So, full steam ahead. I like Gaskin too. Let's move to the Rams at the 49ers, where Raheem Mostert had a really, really good first half. Injured his ankle at the end of the first half, or end of the half, though. He tried to tough it out in the second half, but he was ruled out after just one play. It sounds like Mostert will get an MRI on his ankle on Monday to see the extent of the damage there. And unfortunately, it stinks because Mostert's really fun to watch, but also the backfield may not be all that clear. JaMychal Hasty took over lead back duties in the second half. He had 9 carries and a target. Jerick McKinnon had 6 carries and 3 targets. Jeff Wilson Jr. was inactive. Tevin Coleman is eligible to come off IR now. So I don't think we'll get any fantasy value out of this backfield, even if Mostert does miss time, because they just have too many bodies and they spread things out too much. Thankfully, we can use pass catchers because George Kittle had 10 targets to lead the team. Deebo Samuel had 6, and nobody else had more than 3. In 2 games with Deebo back, Kittle is at 27% of the targets. Deebo's at 20%. Deebo also gets those rush attempts. So Kittle's very much worth the salary. Deebo is good as long as you think they will throw it enough for it to matter, but they're both a clear cut above Brandon Ayuk right now. Problem is that Kittle's facing the Patriots next week, and we know they tend to take out the opposing team's best player, and George Kittle is like one of the best players in football. He will be the emphasis, so that'd be a concern for me. Jared Goff did not play well, but the Rams left a lot on the table here. Cooper Kupp is the worst. He had some big drops, making my boy look bad. They just need a tiny bit off. I feel like the offense is still fine in the right spots. They just weren't quite on Sunday. It also does help that Goff aired it out more. He had an 11.7 yard ADOT. They were letting it rip more, and he put it in the hands of Kupp, but Kupp stinks, so he couldn't quite connect. So I'm going to keep going at the offense, same as I was before. That does not include the running back. Sean McVay said during the week, flat out, that Cam Akers would get more touches this week. He played 1 snap. Instead, Darrell Henderson played 52% of the snaps. He had 14 carries and no targets outside of a hook and ladder play. I'm still not touching this backfield in DFS, especially with the possibility of extra work for Akers. He's just too spread out. The targets went where you'd expect. There were 10 to Robert Woods and 8 to Cooper Kupp. Kupp was bad here. But Jared Goff actually has been more efficient throwing to Kupp than he has been to Woods for the full season. So as much as I like to trash Cooper Kupp, he's been good this year. I'm still going to favor Woods in DFS because he gets 35% of the deep targets, whereas Kupp is at 19%. But I would not use this game as a reason to knock down Kupp. They just had a bad night. And they're both pretty even to me. None of the pass catchers outside of those two are trustworthy, even Tyler Higbee. So it's Woods, Kupp, and maybe Goff in this offense. But it's rough outside of that. As mentioned, they are a Monday Night Football, so we don't need to talk about them for the full slate next week. Brandon, I don't want to go at the 49ers backfield, even if Mostert misses time, given the other options that they have. Am I being too reductive here?
No, they have like 5 backs.
Even Deebo and Ayuk get carries.
Yeah. And the offense isn't amazing, so.
Yeah. Okay. I feel better.
I'm with you.
All right, perfect. That is all the time that we have for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you on week 6?
I think the usual disclaimer, don't necessarily just look at full season market shares and touches. Try to figure out what Jim calls the most relevant sample when guys are getting healthy, when someone misses. I think that's the easiest way to figure out what teams really want to do.
Yep, and we're getting most relevant samples on most teams by now, so we can have a good idea of what to expect. And hopefully things don't go as dumpster fiery in week 7 as they did in week number 6. That is all the time that we have for today. As mentioned, we are back again on Thursday, live on YouTube at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. On Thursday, we'll also be up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. After that, more DFS podcasts coming this week. We have a PGA DFS podcast Tuesday. There's a pretty big UFC card on Saturday. I believe it's pay-per-view, so Austin Swain will likely have a podcast for that on most likely Wednesday night. NASCAR podcast coming up on Friday as well. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. The FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League will be up later this week. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to get yourself entered once that is up. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Good luck to you on the 2-game slate on Monday night. I always enjoy a good 2-game slate. That should be a whole lot of fun. Unless it was yesterday's 4 p.m. only slate. Oh, boy, I forgot about that. Regardless, good luck tonight. We'll talk to you again on Thursday. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.